coalition a key narrative of the upcoming campaign. But should this question of a coalition, should it be answered by the political leaders now? Should you know where they all stand? And is there a real possibility of the coalition option being exercised when the election results are in? I spoke with two of the country's leading constitutional experts about that. Well, from Kingston, Ontario, I'm joined by Ned Franks, Professor Emeritus at Queen's University, and here in the studio with me, just off Parliament Hill, is David Mitchell. He's the President of the Public Policy Forum. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for agreeing to talk to me about this. David Mitchell, let me start with you. If we get another Conservative minority government, what do you think the chances are that we could see the opposition parties look to form a coalition and take down the government right after they take office? Because this is now becoming one of the narratives of this about-to-be-launched election campaign.
Yeah. Well, you know, it really does depend on what the results of the election are. If it's close, if the results are close, I think anything could happen. And if there is some kind of move to have a coalition, that in itself isn't going to be that unusual, in the sense that not only have we a little bit of experience in Canada with coalition governments, during wartime, for instance, but if you look across the British Commonwealth right now, we're living in an era of minority parliaments. I don't think there's another country, major country in the British Commonwealth that doesn't have a minority parliament right now. And when it comes to government formation in a minority parliament, a coalition is one of the options. We know that in the UK, for instance, there's a coalition government right now.
All right, Ned Franks, there are and will be lots of questions about the legitimacy of a coalition of opposition parties looking to topple a newly elected government. You know, where does that conversation take us, that legitimacy conversation? Because we're hearing it now. The Conservatives are suggesting it's not legitimate. We have two of the opposition parties saying, sure it is, and we have Mr. Ignatieff refusing to pronounce. So what's your view on that?
Well, there's a distinction between games and real life, and the legitimacy question is simply a game. You must remember that Mr. Harper himself at one point proposed a coalition. I mean, there is really only one test of legitimacy of a government in Canada, and that is that it must enjoy the confidence of the House of Commons. Mr. Harper has enjoyed that as a minority party in I should say the largest party in a minority parliament, but it looks as though he's going to lose that confidence tomorrow, and then we're tossed into the election. Now, whatever comes out of the election, there probably will be 308 members of parliament belonging to 4 different parties, and if enough of those parties can get together either in a formal coalition or an informal arrangement or a more formal arrangement that isn't a coalition, and say that we can form a majority in the parliament, Mr. Harper is entitled to meet the House. If he gets defeated and that other group of parties will say they can enjoy a majority takeover, then it's their job to prove that they have a majority on votes of confidence.
Right. I think David Mitchell, I'm not sure all Canadians understand that. I mean, there's this idea that, well, it isn't isn't whoever ends up with the most seats. Yes, it turns out to be the Prime Minister, but I'm not sure everybody understands that confidence notion that you're only the Prime Minister and you're only the government as long as you enjoy that confidence of the House.
That's right, and what Ned Franks has just said is so important. There's a lot of misinformation and mischief, quite honestly, taking place around this. As if coalition is somehow a bad word, it's not. It's very legitimate under the circumstances that Professor Franks just outlined. A Prime Minister, even if a returning Prime Minister who's been re-elected, certainly does have the opportunity to meet the House. But if he cannot command a majority, the confidence of the House, then somebody else can and will be given an opportunity to do so.
I think what's interesting, Ned Franks, is, as I said, we have Mr. Ignatieff, refusing to say where he stands on this idea of the coalition. But if we get the same looking Parliament after 6 weeks of an election campaign, and let's say the government were to be defeated in fairly short order on a throne speech, would the Governor General have any, I mean, I guess he would, but I'm asking you in practical terms, would he have any option other than to offer the possibility to the opposition parties to see if they could, form some sort of government that could then enjoy the confidence of the House, rather than saying, well, we'll have another election after the one we just had 5 weeks ago?
Well, let me give you an example from Canada. In 1985, the Progressive Conservative government of Frank Miller was returned with more seats than any other party, but it lost a vote on the speech from the throne very soon after the legislature had met. And at first, Frank Miller seemed to feel that he was entitled to another election right away. He was disabused of that notion, and there was a formal agreement between the opposition Liberals and the NDP that they would support the Liberals as government for 18 months. And this was made public, and the Lieutenant Governor accepted that, and then David Peterson became Premier. Now, something like that can certainly happen in Ottawa without it being a coalition, or it could be a coalition. The problem that Mr. Ignatieff faces here is that Harper did such a good job of damning coalitions as the coalition of the Liberals, the Socialists, and the Separatists, that it's almost become a dirty word in Canadian politics. And if he does want to, if he is returned and can form a government when he, after the election, he's going to have to make a choice on whether it's a coalition or simply an agreement of support.
Right.
This is a very important distinction that that Ned is making. A formal coalition may not be necessary in order for an arrangement or an agreement to take place between two or more parties to effectively provide stable government over a period of time, like that 18-month period in Ontario that Ned referred to. We have had some formal coalitions in Canadian history, generally during wartime. In the First World War here in Ottawa, during the Second World War in British Columbia, there was a formal coalition government, but more likely during a minority parliament, we've had agreements to govern. For instance, in 1972 to 74, under Prime Minister Trudeau, there was a minority parliament where the government of Prime Minister Trudeau governed with the support of the NDP. David Lewis led the NDP at that time. It wasn't a formal coalition, but provided effective government for a couple of years.
Yeah. Okay, let's finish on this. And I think we're going to see this question continue to come up during the election campaign. And Ned Franks, is this an important discussion to be having during the campaign? I know some people say, "Oh, wait a second. You know, let's see the results," and we all agree on that, I think. But should the possibility of a coalition matter to voters as we get into the campaign?
Of course it should, and at some point Mr. Ignatieff might well say that it does matter, that if the alternative to a coalition or some kind of formal agreement is another Harper government, he'd rather have the coalition. But at this point, I think he's doing what I would do in his shoes and saying we're not going to talk about coalitions. We Liberals are going to win this election. And Harper, of course, will say the same on his side.
Yeah. David, what's your view?
Coalition is not a dirty word. It shouldn't be made a dirty word. It's quite respectable. Look at the United Kingdom. Look at so many other parliaments. But it's only one option. And if we have a parliament of minorities, all the options must be looked at, and they are going to be looked at.
All right, gentlemen, interesting days ahead. Thanks for your time this evening. Appreciate it.